Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Ever since they were first introduced in 3rd edition D&D, skill checks have played a huge role in just about any adventure campaign that's been released. And most campaigns will feature at some point or another a section where the player characters have to do some research. And I've always wanted to try to find ways to make skill checks a little more interesting. And that can go as far as for things like diplomacy or to bluff, to kind of have the players say what they're actually saying, even if it's kind of point form for those who aren't comfortable role-playing sort of in a first-person type of capacity. But I've been thinking lately about how to make history checks more interesting. And one of the things that kind of struck me for inspiration is I've been reading some of the Eberron campaign setting lately, working on the retrospective I want to do for that. And it mentions the idea of doing a flashback adventure. And I always wanted to, like years ago when I first started running 3rd edition, I had an idea for a campaign that involved two sets of player characters. And just kind of thinking back on that, that one never got off the ground, unfortunately. The person that I had asked to serve as the second DM ended up kind of stealing the idea for himself and then accusing me of ripping him off, which didn't sit well with me, so I kind of scrapped those plans altogether. But looking back at that and seeing the flashback campaign idea, it just really got me thinking of how to make history checks feel more exciting. And because it usually just involved the player characters going to a library, doing some research, and rolling the skill check, and depending on the number they get, you give them information. So they get like 10 or less, you may give them very bare bones stuff, the accuracy of which could be questionable. Up to like 15 or 18, they tend to get pretty solid information, and 20 or above, they usually get, this really detailed information. But that's kind of anticlimactic, and I thought it would be an interesting way to engage the player characters. Instead of telling them what happens with history, letting them actually play it out. And to do that, it's not something I think I would do a lot, but I've been contemplating the idea of creating a campaign where the player characters at character generation make two sets of characters. The first one is the main characters that they're going to play, and they'll be starting at the beginning of their adventuring career, so they'd be first level characters. The second set would be probably between 8th and 10th level. And the idea is that, the second set of characters are from a previous age, be it a century ago, a millennia ago, or even like, 10 to 20 years ago. But the player characters are going to be following sort of in their footsteps. It could be that this second group of adventurers found a relic that's significant, and the player characters are trying to determine what happened to it so that they can retrieve it for their own purposes. It could be that they have a weapon that is the only thing that can destroy a particular, villain or monster that's threatening the region that the player characters are from, so they have to find out what happened to that. Or they have a ritual that's kind of in the same vein. So they found like a ritual book, and you're trying to find out what happened to it, so you're kind of retracing their steps. So the idea would be that, probably 2 or 3 times throughout the campaign, the player characters would have to research, maybe they want to go to a dungeon that's reported to have been the dungeon where they found said item. So you have the player characters do some research before they go to see if they can learn anything about the dungeon, and they make their checks, and basically based off of how well they rolled dictates the kind of adventure that they play. So it's probably not something for inexperienced DMs, but I just think it'd be kind of cool. Like, let's just say you make your history check and you get, like a 10. So not very good. Instead of having the full dungeon available and letting the players take these second characters through the actual dungeon, you create a stack of cards, like on index cards, that are just random rooms. And the actual rooms are probably not 100% exactly how they are in the actual dungeon. But you basically just draw off the stack, and say you do like 5 of the rooms. And, the dimensions could probably be similar, but not quite exact. You may have one where they have they find a secret door that actually ends up being part of a different room in the dungeon later on. But you still get enough of an idea of some of the encounters that they had and some of the battles that they fought. And, if they get more moderate success, then, you could do something similar, except instead of having rooms that are incorrect, you would remove those and say, if it's a 30-room dungeon, let's just say that they, learn about half of the rooms. So you could have a map drawn up that is more direct to the final encounter, but the rooms themselves that the players go through are accurate. So like if they have a trap in the flashback adventure, then the trap would be in the same place in the actual adventure. And if they get a 20 or higher, then you could have them go through the actual full dungeon as it is. And when the player characters themselves go through the dungeon, they would know kind of what's going on. And it's a way of rewarding them for rolling decently. It's a way of rewarding them for paying attention to what happened during the flashback. But again, it just presents an opportunity for a little bit of fun. So, you know, again, you could throw them kind of off a little bit if they roll poorly. Or you could reward them for doing well in terms of letting them get the entire layout of the dungeon, which is fine. But the cool thing about it is you basically, the things that happen during the flashback, you can reference when the player characters go to the actual place. So let's just say they have an encounter on this like stone bridge, you know, this thin stone bridge, footbridge, or whatever, and they have this battle with, say, let's just say they're fighting like a gnoll or something, and this gnoll charges at them, and they do this thing where, you know, the fighter throws a javelin, pierces his chest, and then like an archer, you know, shoots it twice, you know, gets a critical or something like that, so, you know, blinds it in one eye, and the creature ends up falling off the side and getting impaled on a spike below. So in the flashback that happens, and then when the player characters enter the actual area, they look down into the pit, and there they see like this skeleton remains that has like a javelin sticking out of it, an arrow sticking out of an eye socket, and it's impaled on a spike. So that'd be kind of cool. You could also have things like, if they rolled poorly, let's just say that they have a trap or an encounter that seems very tough and very deadly. And the player characters go through, and you kind of be, if it's in like a combat encounter, you're kind of vague about what they're actually fighting. So you make it at least seem like this big hulking behemoth that the heroes in the flashback just barely overcome. And when the player characters get there, they see like a kobold skeleton, you know, in that spot where this other thing should have died, realizing that it was just a bad encounter with a single kobold, and they lied about how tough it was to make it seem like they were better adventurers. But I just thought it would be kind of a neat idea to let them role play that history out. Again, something that you don't want to use too much in the campaign. I would probably only have about 2 or 3 sections where that would be what would happen. But I just thought it was an interesting idea, and I guess what I want to know from you guys is, how do you feel about that? Would you be interested in running or playing in a campaign where you do something along those lines? Would you be interested in, you know, having a second set of characters that you can play through? Do you think that there would be potential fun in actually rolling poorly and seeing how just much misinformation is created, which could be the result of the previous heroes exaggerating things? You know, you could have a situation where they, you know, defeat this monster thinking that, hey, they won and they vanquished it. And when the player characters get there, they find out that it is still very much alive and not very happy to see them. So again, there's just a lot of, I think, interesting potential. And again, it's a better way of presenting the information that you get from a history check than just saying, you know, here are the point forms, like, you know, you learn this, 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 and this. Instead, you actually let them play it out. And, you know, you would want to make it small enough for the most part that you could do it in a single session, or, you know, a couple of sessions. You don't want it to be something where it takes like 3 months to go through this flashback. But if you could do it in a night or a couple of nights, I just think it'd be something that'd be really fun. And I want to run that kind of campaign at some point in the future. So let me know what you guys think. Again, if you think it's an interesting idea, if you think it's a little bit too much, you know, if you don't like the idea of playing a second set of characters, you know, let me know, because I'm interested in your guys' feedback, and if there's any ideas that you can kind of give me if I do something like that. So anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I look forward to your feedback, and I'll see you next time.